Hello, everyone. It's done. 10th draft, or what's also known as second pass, has been completed. I'm exhausted. It was sent into Pantheon, in fact, yesterday. Um, and a lot of feelings. A lot of feelings. The eighth draft, which resulted in the pre-galley, as I've spoken about before, had at least 12,000 corrections. The ninth draft had 800 queries from Pantheon, plus another 1,200 corrections um, uh, that I had to address. This feels like a very clean copy that's going in. There will probably be a soft third pass, so any final fines, any final adjustments, we're talking literally on the typo level, the comma level, can still be made. But for the most part, it is out of my hands. And I do want to address the experience of errors a little here. Certainly, there's been an improvement. We've gone from 12,000 to 1,200 to probably about 120. Um, and I would love to say that this draft is completely error free, but in some ways, keeping with the enforced humility that's necessary on big projects, I have to accept that perhaps uh, the erroneous keystroke or nodding eye may have let some pass. I'm optimistic that in this the final month or so that many of those will be rooted out. And I guess one of the reasons I dwell on it is because there is, as those of you who've read my work before, a great deal of intentionality in how the text is presented, rearranged, altered. And with a manuscript that has still 12,000 plus corrections to go, it's very easy to lose that signal in the noise. But I'm confident that the noise has been reduced substantially, and that those, particular peculiarities uh, can shine a little more clearly, and and whether they are fully parsed. uh, my great contention is that there will still be an emotional impact that's communicated when you see text that's rearranged in a certain way, or adjusted, or whatnot. And this goes down to um, the very way that the book is laid out. As some of you already know who have received the galleys, congratulations. There were not a lot printed, so not a lot of people got them. There's a teaser version, which is just the first act of Tom's Crossing. And you have, if you've been lucky to receive those, come against those great walls of words, and that's something that's been part of the design, even though it doesn't seem as obvious as, say, what you saw in volume 5, for example, of the Familiar. There's been a great deal of thought, years of thought, in how that text has been arranged on the page, with its limitations, from the gutter to the margins to where the folio rests, and how it demands a kind of immersiveness within the language. You don't just simply race up this cliff, this rocky wall. Each move is particular, and what you do is you find yourself in the zone of what's next, and the precision that's required to make your ascent. But the more focused you become, the more physically engaged, the more that becomes more transportive for the reader. It begins to impart that sense of journey and even that sense of accomplishment. Um, those of you who do love the more the more open pages, the ledges of space in which you can rest, you will be pleased to find that there are some of those. And But even it was interesting for me because in this last phase, it was this 10th draft. It was really addressing the orphans, which are tiny, tiny little words that finish a paragraph on a line by themselves. Those are typically removed. And or dealt with. And then there's also widows. So, for example, the last line of a paragraph starting the next page. And so those are reduced. But what I found was an opportunity, even there, as finishing the typesetting, of creating a certain rhythm in those walls of texts of where the widows could be removed, so to allow kind of a resting spot at the end of a page, but or in certain sequences to actually allow the reader to more easily continue on to the page. Now, if I've done this well, you won't really notice, but there's been a great attention to that, even how sections start and stop, where they start and stop, and again to give you these moments to take a breather and or move more rapidly, or even check out the view of how far you've come and what's left to go, which of course is always being physically communicated to you by the actual book itself that you're holding on to. But I have puzzled over the number of errors, and first and foremost, I have to say that it's my fault, and perhaps I've in some ways gotten lax, perhaps like some sort of athlete who's gotten a little slower or dimmer. Perhaps these are just simply errors that I am making, and I cannot do better than that. Try as I might. And I completely own that this is where I am in my life, and this is the way I write, and the correctives that are offered later are just part of the process, and part of the humbling exercise that I hope everyone who's at least watching these videos, because I'm assuming at this point that you are writers, you are creators, you are artists who understand that the process doesn't just end with that first expulsion of the imagination, but must continue on through an experience that is very much about endurance and focus and commitment and passion, in the way that I refer to passion in House of Leaves. But I do think there was something in particular about this book that may have also generated or allowed for the generation of these kind of errors. And one is that it's a very acoustic book. There is a music to the voice, which you will encounter soon. And it is so powerful, at least for me. It was so inhabiting, in a way, so much not my own voice, that it overrode any sensation of text. This was a book that didn't play back and forth with the visible text versus the spoken text, and it was literally this voice that overwrapped everything, to the point that I was missing the elision of words. I was missing the careless flipping of words, and obviously some typos, misspellings, whatever had kind of managed to get in. That it was very difficult to see that, because the voice itself was so in my ear. And again, this seems like a peculiar, very personal thing that would be said by a writer, and as an excuse for why there were mistakes. And yet I noticed it happening constantly with copy editors, other proofreaders, friends. Some of these things were completely invisible. One person had found one typo in 5 pages, and was shocked to discover that I had already ferreted out 5 or 6 errors per page. Now, why was that happening? A lot of homophones were in there, like surprising as it may sound, I know the difference between there and there, THERE, and THEY apostrophe RE, and yet some of those slip through. What was going on there? And in the end, it's still difficult for me to look at that text and not immediately hear this voice, and that voice immediately like overexposes the text to the point that it's almost invisible. So it's this auditory component, which I think for new readers will soon become the predominant experience. And I'm really envying you that experience. And we'll get to this just a tiny bit later about the sort of emotional impact it's had on me of saying, in some ways, goodbye to this voice, and recognizing that I will only, hear this voice again through your voices. And the second part, which seems absolutely in contradiction to everything I've just said, is that there's a very intense visual element to this book. It is so vivid in my eye that, again, it kind of washes away, eclipses, overexposes the text with the image that it proposes. And that is, as well, has been very strange. Of course, it's more formally located, and especially in certain moments, in the ekphrastic. A classic example of the ekphrastic, which is the description of a thing, of an image with text, would be the shield of Achilles in the Iliad. It's just a static chapter devoted to describing what this shield looks like. And yet it's anything but static, and yet extraordinarily vivid. So in a formal way, Tom's Crossing, takes hold of that tradition and does what it can to delight in it, as well as to utilize in some ways its instabilities, whether that's upon a rocky side of a great mountain or elsewhere. And this will be a component that becomes very evident to you, especially as one begins to perceive what at first seems like these static sort of artistic tableaus that begin to interpolate the text. And so there you have it. For me, it's two very strange, very, very different sides to this text. The very, 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 auditory experience, and the very, very visual experience, which has a way of kind of combating the text which creates it. And I think it's something that I will puzzle over a great deal in the future, especially as I get some distance from it. And I think the distance is interesting. I don't really know what awaits me. As I finish this final draft, I realize this is probably the last time I will read Tom's Crossing from page one from the alpha page to the omega page for some time. Like, that experience is gone from me. And when that happened, it was extremely painful. It was extremely sad. I think I was unprepared for the departure that I was going to experience, and that I did experience, and I'm still processing it, and maybe I am in a bit of even denial about it. It's spooky, it's ghostly, it's melancholy. There's a kind of liberation that comes with it, in a way that I'm done. The journey has been completed, has been finished, and that at the same time, just this great deal of longing to return to it in a way that I know I can't. And I can't tell you, how wonderful it is to begin to take a peek at folks as they begin to articulate their own experience. And I know that this journey is now for you, and And by all means, you don't have to share that with me. That is not your role at all. You have no burden other than your own curiosity. Um, and but I would be remiss if I didn't explore a little about that longing to see, you know, how this experience is living out in the world, especially in an emotional way, because its emotional impact um, was powerful enough for me to not only resonate in very, very early drafts, but to almost too potently resonate with me in this final draft. There were sections that were just incredibly difficult for me to read. Um, and not necessarily because they were so painful, though there are those moments, but because they were so of itself. Um, and I don't want to go into that anymore, but that almost sense of possession by something that goes beyond you. That how lucky have I been to be able to grant words to this voice that moved through me. And I know this can probably only be interpreted as arrogance and smugness, and go ahead, fire away. Uh, I don't want to use the word satisfaction because I can't quite claim that, but maybe there's just a sense of accomplishment. Regardless of how Tom's Crossing does in now the marketplace, whether there is a commercial um, viability for this particular experience, I do feel that there's an achievement here that is the result of a lifetime of work. Literally, the work that I started when I was very young. I was always very lucky, blessed in a way, to have figured out what I wanted to do and be able to pursue that, my whole life. That this now amounts to the best writing I've been able to accomplish. It surpasses everything that I've done in the past. And I know this the way I think a mathematician knows proof, or a rock climber knows that they've free soloed the face of a daunting wall and made it to the top, and found the experience delightful. And I guess I did find it delightful, even as it was harrowing, even as it was overwhelming. Um, and and I share this with you in particular because I don't know how I don't know if I'll be able to recognize this feeling as clearly as I can today, a year from now, when Tom's Crossing, it begins to make sense what it did and what it didn't do, and how it reached, people, and how it didn't reach people, and it becomes more easily categorized. Right now, it's just to share that there's a confidence that comes from this experience that has nothing to do with how it will be received or judged, but in simply the knowing of all that it contains. Its formal architecture, its formal structure, but also its sort of informal inspirations that verges on possession. The musicality of its voice, which is an aggregate, a coagulate of everything that I've read and loved, and experienced, and that you as artists can also feel that. You too can finish something and say, it doesn't matter what happens after this. I'll be interested to know what happens after this. What matters is I know what this is doing. I know what it's doing on the page, what it's doing on the canvas, what it's doing on the screen, what it's doing in its dimensionality, whether clay or bronze, whatever your medium, you understand all of it. You're not gambling in the sense of like, oh, I hope this works for someone. You understand what you've articulated, and as far as my understanding is capable of grasping what this journey means, um, I've I've at least reached a place where I'm confident in all that's there, and excited for anyone who's willing to take to take that journey. And I also recognize that the journey is difficult. There is no gondola or chairlift or road or escalator to the very top. Anyone who makes that journey will have also climbed that wall, and they will have done it in the company of their own heart, their own musings, and their own griefs. And what they find on the other side and what choice they make will be particular to them, particular to you. Anyway, onwards. I suppose what remains is probably adding to that declaration that I'm done. Maybe a question mark. Maybe there will be some final little changes. At least a soft permissive semicolon. And what awaits now is the finalizing of the jacket. You've seen the cover. It's for the most part complete. The end papers, possibly the boards, final decisions on the paper, and after that, it will be a process of really determining what a book tour is going to look like. I really kind of want to have a book party, I have to say. I haven't had a book party in a long time. I think the last one really was House of Leaves. And there's a reason for that. The industry doesn't really believe that parties help book sales. And they're probably right about it. But I feel like having a party. I feel like just even if it was a fun party. And so at least I'm circling that in my imagination. I think if it was going to happen, it should happen on October 28th when it comes out. And that's it for now. Those of you who are here, who've been on this journey, you know, I really appreciate your time here and always your feedback. And onwards.